Hello, bonsai friends. This is Evan Pardue of Underhill Bonsai, and welcome to episode 40. What's up? We're at 40,
Wow.
10 away from our landmark, our milestone episode, more like 50.
Oh
We're
my
getting
gosh.
close. I know, right? Isn't that crazy?
That's really crazy.
Of Little Things for Bonsai People, the podcast.
Hello, bonsai friends. This is your friendly neighborhood producer, Matt O'Donnell. If you'd like to know something truly crazy, it's that this is not, in fact, episode 40 of Little Things for Bonsai People. It is episode 39. Check this space again next week when Evan gets to be very excited a whole second time about being 10 episodes away from the big 5-0. Now, back to the action.
Today, I am joined by, if you can't tell,
Hello.
Lesko Vince. How's it going, Lesko Vinsky? How is it going, Carmen Lesko Vinsky, a current apprentice at Michael Hagedorn's Bonsai Garden in Portland? How's it going?
Pretty good. How are you?
Pretty good. How's it going, Lesko Vinsky? So today we're going to be talking about forest plantings. We're going to do some like light stuff on like what makes them what they are, because it's a really it's complicated, but it's not. Forest plantings are very nuanced depending on what you're using, like what species you're using, what you're trying to portray with the whole setting, the landscape, the scene. We're gonna do a critique on a listener request. This is actually like a combo episode. It's like they wanted us to talk about forest plantings, but also critique their forests. So I thought this was a great little tie-in for that. And then I figured we kind of talk about the season. We do another seasonal check-in kind of thing, just to talk about Midsummer. Not the movie. The movie was terrifying, but talk about like the time of the year.
I don't do horror.
Oh, I mean, I recommend it if you like really pretty movies. It's a gorgeously shot movie, but it's got some really big shock factors in it. But yeah, anyway, Midsummer, like as in like the middle of summer care, because we didn't really do a seasonal checkup on like approaching summer. So I think we're in this kind of buffer zone where Portland, you mentioned earlier when we were just starting to get on, that you said it's significantly boiling outside right now.
Well, the last couple of days have been cooler, but yeah, it's been hot for me, but anything over 75 is hot for me.
It's
So
warm.
but it's been hot enough outside that the studio is 10 or 15 degrees warmer, and so
Oh, and y'all don't have a lot of good airflow in there. The only thing you can do is open the windows.
trying to get a ceiling fan installed, but see if I can do that before it bumps up to 95 next week. Ugh.
Things are a little bit different in the middle of summer for bonsai too. I know preparing for the summertime, but we're going to talk about how to approach it. I know there's a couple of things we could do with shade netting or watering techniques to change things up. But before we get too far into all the things that we're kind of beating around the bush to getting to, beating around the bush, yeah, that's a little pun there. Before we get started, I do need to mention that our podcast is sponsored by our amazing patrons over on patreon.com/little things for bonsai people. You could become a bonsai best bud. That's going to be our top tier and our only tier right above $1. But $5 paid patrons, we list them off every episode because they're amazing. They're good and awesome, but best buds, and they can be found in our Discord, hanging out and talking bonsai all day. Starting off with Tori Solis, Warehouse Rat, Boyd Snellgrove, Ricky Ruins, Joshua Bentley, Snappy Chappers, Ryan Giordano, Joel Jenkins, Justin Knight, Backyard Bonsai Australia, Greenwich Gardens. I think that was formerly the Ladies of the Flower Market. I think they changed their name. Taylor Peacock, Chase Petweet, Vicky Auth, Austin Atkins, Karen Coswell, and a brand new bonsai best bud. At first, I thought this was this person's name, but I realized we were talking before we started recording that this is actually a reference to the garden. It's In Ryu In. Thank you for becoming a bonsai best bud. I was told that this is actually, look at my emails, Rebecca, the horticulturalist, apparently. I don't know if the horticulturalist is your last name. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Horticulturalist. But this is
I want that to be my last name, Carmen the horticulturist.
Middle name the.
Yeah, Carmen T. Horticulturalist.
Yeah. So welcome to the Bonsai Best Bud group. And
Welcome.
I don't know if I sent out the Discord link to you. I think I might have. I don't know, but I will go back and check, and I will do another random drop. Sorry, I was drinking my milk. I'll have to go in and do another drop into the group for the patrons and get everybody the Discord link just in case they never got in or they're trying to catch up. But yeah, we've been over there talking about the cutting challenge. I've been seeing a lot of really awesome material taken for cuttings. A lot of people are getting ballsy and taking more air layer cuttings off of things, like doing air layers on big branches of trees and stuff. Everybody's getting pretty fired up, and I like to see that. And then it's just encouraging me to take more cuttings and take really cool air layers as well. So I just haven't posted in my cuttings of my air layers yet because they haven't been 100% takes. I do promise though that I have. Oh, I did wire up my Primna japonicas. Those
I
actually
wired
really.
mine up too.
There you
Well,
go.
not my cuttings, but the ones you sent me last year, I wired those up and pruned them back a little bit and took cuttings from them. And I have like 2 other trays of cuttings of maples and azaleas and more cuttings than I need. So
Anticipate.
and some Chojibai root cuttings,
Oh, yeah.
and I just can't stop.
Do you mind if we share that Chochibai? Was that yours to share that picture?
Which one?
The one you sent me a picture of the other day.
Oh no, it's not mine, but we might be
Okay.
able to share it. I'll ask and see if we can put
Okay.
it out there. It's gonna be Crataegus has a wait list for Choju by sales. So if you want on the wait list, I'll email Michael Hagedorn.
Yeah, the Chochibai out there are amazing.
We've been having every time we work on one, I'm like, oh, I love this one. This one's so cool. This one's my favorite. And then like the next one comes up and I'm like, oh, I love this one. This one's so cool. This one's my favorite. Like every Choju ride that comes through, I'm like, oh wow, that's really, really special. It's really funny.
me and every tree that I encounter ever. Like,
Yeah, pretty much.
if I do any kind of work to it, I'm like, man, I think I love this tree.
Yeah, this is my favorite tree. I've never worked on anything quite like this before.
And you probably haven't, but I mean,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, thank you, Best Buds, for that. Like I was mentioning about the cuttings, that's the cutting challenge. We challenged our patrons to go in and start cuttings from their favorite trees, from their favorite species, and get them to strike so that it can get good roots. And then we're going to wire them, and then we're going to share pictures of them as they develop. And then we'll do like a little, not like a competition, but like a little show off of our patrons' process as they go through. So I want to see some really good progress photos. I've been seeing some really great ones. So we'll get a little compilation of cool projects and stuff and share them to the Instagram, which you can go check out. Little Things for Bonsai People, the Instagram account has, it's kind of like it's like a weird mod podge of like my stuff and the Instagram stuff. I mean, of the podcast show stuff. So just bear in mind that if you see pictures of dogs, they're my dogs. I'm just, hanging out. But anyway, also before we get too far, I don't want to fail to mention ever that our show is edited by Matt O'Donnell. I'm so glad I can say his name.
I
the
just
correct
really
way.
still want you to call him Matt O'Donnell.
Matt O'Donnell, a bass player and music producer in Nashville, Tennessee. If you have a podcast out there you want him to help you edit or work on, or if you are a musician, not a magician, if you are a musician and you would like some audio engineering and really get your project off the ground, go over to mattodonnell.com. That's DONNELL.com, mattodonnell.com. Oh, there's an O in the front of that. ODONNELL.com. And you can go fill out a contact form. You can go to his Instagram, same name, Matt O'Donnell. He's actually got some cool content. If you go in there, Matt's probably over there just cringing in his seat as he has to edit this episode. He's like, oh, she's just loud capping the crap out of me right now. But you go over to Matt's Instagram. He's got like a couple of like review and introspective kind of videos where he talks about bass lines and developing music and stuff. It's really cool stuff. So go over there and check out his Instagram. He's a really cool dude. But anyway, let's talk about forest plantings. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome.
I was born ready.
You were born ready to talk about forest plantings, right?
I love a forest planting.
I mean, we got into
doesn't?
bonsai because we love forests, right?
I think that forests are probably one of the most relatable things because I'm thinking back at the university collection where I would be kind of in like the studio space working on something and people would walk through the garden but not know that I was there because there was like a wall separating. But every time they got to the forest on the other side of the wall from me, every single time without fail, oh my God, it's like a tiny forest. And I would just be like in there giggling to myself. And then they like come around the corner and see me and be a little bit embarrassed. But anyway, I always feel like people can relate to forests and they always seem to win People's Choice Awards because I think that people can really, I mean, they can just relate to them so well. Everybody's been in a forest. Everybody loves, well, a lot of people love being in the woods or have fond memories of the woods. So, yeah, I think they kind of hit different.
They do. They really do hit different using some newer slang there.
Oh yeah, I'm
Dating
hip.
ourselves. It just hits differently, you know.
Yeah, my dude.
No. Oh, did you? This is kind of off topic a little bit. Did you see the new Futurama episode?
Oh my God, of course I did.
Sweet.
It was really good. I was really impressed. I was like, it felt kind of like the original ones, and I was happy.
There was a couple of moments where I was like, "Oh, don't go there! Wait, save it!" And they were like, "All right, back to a Calculon feature." And I'm like, "Oh, cool! I like him." So, if any of you guys don't know, the host of the show, me, Carmen, and Mike were all huge nerds. So, if anyone's out there, we were talking about this in the Discord. We were talking about being Pokemon fans and stuff earlier on too. Like, we were being totally transparent here, but I was totally hyped up for the Futurama episode. It just popped in my head for a second. I was like, wait, Carmen needs to know if she doesn't. I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. We watched it right away.
We can give our full review on the new season of Futurama once it drops on the next episode if you can.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. We're going to have a Futurama episode.
That would actually be kind of funny, but there's not enough bonsai related things. I've seen more bonsai in like Cowboy Bebop than I've seen in Futurama, if we're talking about animation. But anyway, back to forests. Forest plantings I think are the most relevant sidebar. Most relevant thing to bonsai. Like I think if you're somebody who's into bonsai and you don't like the forests or you're not related to them in some way, I would think it would be a little odd unless you're like in an urban environment and you like crave like nature and you really want more of that. That's kind of like what the whole thing is based off of, you know, like the old legend that one of the earliest palaces in China had a courtyard where they recreated miniature scenes for the emperor so he can enjoy nature closer because he was in this heavily populated area where bringing the nature and the forest closer to you brought you tranquility and it brought you sublime places and thoughts. And yeah, I think it would be really weird if somebody was really into bonsai and they just didn't have some connection to the forest. Like for me, for instance, I was born in England.
Were you really?
Yes.
Do you have dual citizenship?
I did for a little while. I was born in England because my dad was in the military. So
that's cool.
It was the Air Force. So I was an Air Force brat, whatever. I was like 2 or 3 years old, and then we moved back to the States anyway.
Did you have an accent?
I did.
Like a little British accent?
I didn't have like a baby Goo Goo Gaga accent. No, it went away. If there was any accent at all, those things are probably like I could probably unlock them if I hit my head hard enough, but I don't think they're there. I don't think I actually can have produce an accent that wouldn't like offend anybody. So I'm not going to do that. All right. But yeah, so I was born over there and then we moved over to New Mexico for a little while. And then we came to here into Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana. And if anyone's familiar with this part of the country, it's heavily wooded. I have a friend from New Mexico. From New Mexico, who came and visited us, and she was like, "It's so claustrophobic here." Like she's comparing it to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I went and visited her in her hometown, and I could see the stark difference there. So like you'd have to drive like up a little bit more elevation and kind of like get towards the Sandia Mountains to really start getting some more foresty kind of feel. But Louisiana's so flat, we're so low. I can look out my window and I can't even see a half mile away. I mean, there's so many trees here. And I think Portland and Michigan are both very similar.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I grew up on 3 acres, which I mean isn't a ton of acreage, but it's something. And we had we had a field in the back. My dad planted a bunch of Scotch pine. And so we had like this pine forest back there. And then the front was like a deciduous forest and a swamp. And so like, and then my grandparents lived next door on 3 acres. And then our neighbors had another 3 acres and little kids. So like we had this like 9 acre range to play in of all this woods and swamp and stuff. And
oh yeah. Just
so I mean, I was outside in the woods all the time, and I still find the woods to be like my favorite place to go. There's always something to look at and explore. And yeah, and then now here in Portland, the vegetation is different. It's a lot more almost of a monoculture with the Doug firs. But there's tons of forest all around. And yeah, I've always lived really close to forests and spent a lot of time there. And yeah, so big part of my life. Now that I think about it, a lot of woods in my life.
Whenever you're young and you grow up in that type of environment, 'cause you said you had the acres of land, and and I had an area where my mom lives. It was like 10 acres. I grew up on that,
yeah.
of just like pine wood forest. And I can just imagine back whenever I was younger, like these worlds that I would create in my head. You know,
Oh yeah, same.
and these forts that we would build, and just stalk around in the woods like a bunch of weirdos, like a bunch of kids just like playing hide and seek or trying to climb trees. I mean, that
Catching
and so
frogs, jumping
yeah.
in puddles,
Seeing-
crossing creeks,
seeing
Yep.
snakes and getting spooked and stuff, and
Oh yeah.
all kinds of cool stuff. Just and so when we do forest plantings in bonsai, we can try to capture that playfulness and that imaginary feel to those things, but there are unfortunately there are a couple of outlining rules, not necessarily like hard and fast rules, but there are like kind of guidelines that are basically kind of just rules that kind of helps you
Yeah.
not just have a bunch of sticks in a pot. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, for what it is, it's one of the reasons why I had gotten into bonsai was to make forest plantings. Where I'm at, like I wanted to see bald cypresses in a forest planting, and because I'd seen that a few times, I went to Guy Guidry's garden that he had over here in Covington, Louisiana, and he had a couple of forest plantings. He had like bald cypresses, of course. He had trident maples, cedar elms, winged elm forests, stuff like that. And then he had a couple of the Fumia junipers, like the ones that the same species you see in Goshen.
Yeah, the needle juniper.
Yeah, the really nice kind of bluish needle juniper with the real I saw an article written by Michael the other day. He posted one of those. Those trees are so beautiful. And so you'd see trees like that, and I'm just like, I want that. But you don't get the perspective of that. Most of the time, forests like that are enormous, and it takes a lot of time and a lot of materials, and to get that kind of thing together and get that kind of thing planted correctly where it's not going to fall over, to get it planted and maintained where it's going to thrive. I mean, there's so many things, but before I start rambling on too much, what is your first impressions of a forest planting when you look at one? Like, what are you looking for?
What am I looking for? I want it to feel believable, and I think there's a couple ways to do that, and probably the most important one is to not have everything evenly spaced. And then the other things I'm looking for are, I don't know. Mostly I just want it to be believable and pretty. I'm trying to think, what are the things that make it those what characteristics bring that about?
So like,
do you want me to go into technical stuff, or are we just
we're going to go into the technical stuff, but like when I think of forest planting, Also thinking of like species selection, that's pretty.
Oh yeah,
pretty
that's really
important.
important because if you have something with really big leaves, it's not going to read as nicely as something with tiny leaves. Um, yeah, you want movement, you want different shapes, you want um I really like when they're kind of mounded or slightly, there's a little bit of undulation almost in the um soil line. Um yeah.
Yeah, so like for instance, when I think of species, I think of junipers are suited for certain
Mhm.
forest plantings, like your classic like the Goshen kind of
Mhm.
look. That's really cool. But we
Mhm.
can't put something like a bunch of junipers with like twisted deadwood and pronounced features like that and huge trunks, and that won't
Yeah, that
really
doesn't.
make any sense.
Yeah.
Um, we can't do anything weird like vining, like unless you're really like a wizard with forest plantings. You can make something like wisteria work or something.
Hmm.
Um,
Never
but
seen that. But now I want to try something viney.
yeah,
Just to see if I can
exactly.
do it.
So what's out of range for a forest planting? Like what is unacceptable? Like I mean, like bigger leaves, yes, a bigger leaf plant, or you could just make a really big forest planting. I've also seen people
Mhm.
do
I
that.
mean,
Um,
also with the big leaf stuff, I mean, traditionally in Japan, deciduous trees are shown in the wintertime, so they wouldn't have leaves. So technically, that doesn't really matter. But a lot of times here in the States, we like to show things, even when they're in leaf. So, um, and then also considering if you have like a young beech forest, your leaves are going to be bigger than, in 20 years when it's a mature thing. But yeah, like something like a horse chestnut probably wouldn't work because those leaves are just
oh,
giant.
a horse chestnut tree.
A horse chestnut. Can you imagine a horse
Yeah,
chestnut
like
forest? That'd
and
be
that
wild.
leaf as long as your arm.
They can, or a
Yeah,
sycamore.
yeah, like oh yeah,
Oh
definitely
my
like a
God.
sycamore. You could wear that as like a hat. You could like tie that
Yeah.
around your head and like put a rubber band on. It would like give you shade during the day. But no,
Uh,
yeah, like I mean, you can use all kinds of stuff. Like
mhm.
my favorite ones are trident maple forests
Mhm.
are really great, really easy to conceptualize
Mhm.
when you're building them because they have that tendency to grow fast, straight, tall, and then you can
Mhm.
cut them back really nice and easy.
And
Um,
they create those weird kind of bulges along their trunks that give you that, as they grow, because they have so many little, um, they just, they grow so fast and they have so many buds and stuff. They just kind of grow bulgy.
lumpy, yeah. Like
Lumpy. There you go.
I
Yeah.
was looking at some yeah, lumpy. That's the
Yeah.
word.
Lumpy. That's what I'm talking about.
That's gonna be the bonsai word of the week probably.
I want a lumpy
No
forest.
no spoils. No lumpy. Uh, oh God. So I was looking at trident maples today with some people, and they were ground growing them, like field growing them, with me at the nursery. We have like several hundred of them, and they picked out a couple of them that were fun to work on. We chopped them down short, and we regrew the tops on them. And time again, I get this question about trident maples. They're like, "Isn't this reverse taper?" And I'm like, "Well, is it? I mean." I mean, really, it is, but that's what they do. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to explain with a trident maple. It's that undulation, like that weird lumpy, and then like it looks like
Mhm.
muscling, but it's not. It's just how they grow.
Yeah.
It's kind of reminiscent of like a Brazilian rain tree, where
Mm-hmm.
it just cuts loose and just does the weirdest like trunk line. It makes bulges and twists and turns. But I mean, like, yeah, like so things that have interest to them, like elm trees, maples, cypress. It doesn't have to be bald cypress to
Hornbeams are
be anything.
nice.
Hornbeams are great. Hackberries. I've
Hmm.
seen sweet plums. That's like a Beijing, very common Beijing planting tree.
Hmm.
Junipers, spruce.
Oh, spruce is nice, especially a nice azo spruce forest. Oh,
Yeah,
love it.
larch,
You can do hemlock.
hemlock. Oh, dude, yeah. Well, you want to see
Hmm.
some great, but they're a lot more like connected root
Yeah, they're more
plantings.
like clumps or wraps almost. Yeah.
Yeah, at Michael's
Forest.
Garden, they have the
Yeah.
big connected root rafts, but they are very force planting.
Yeah, it feels like a forest.
Yeah. So those are great inspirations. But yeah, I think one of the things that we have to break down is like I was saying, like the guidelines. They're kind of like rules, but they
Mhm.
help They really help.
Mm-hmm.
You key in how to build a forest. It's kind of like when you start with your bonsai and you're building your bonsai.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, Nabari. You have to have a Nabari on it. Number two, you need a good Takagari. You need something that shows us where the trunk line and which direction it's heading in. Number three, you need like a good first branch. So that's going to tell you the movement of the tree overall, or the first branch is going to tell you what the rest of the tree, like its character or its expression, its gesture, whatever you want to say. It's feminine, masculine features. And then 4, you want like the silhouette of the tree and the overall proportions and everything. Like how big does this tree feel? And so forest plantings are very similar. They have the same kind of guidelines, but forest plantings have very particular guidelines. So you said earlier, Carmen, like different spacing. And that's on my, like, I give like a little lecture every once in a while whenever I do like a forest planting class at the nursery or a workshop. That spacing is like one of the most important aspects of a good forest planting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a couple of the other guidelines that like can be kind of flexible and played around with, but none of your trees, if you take like a measuring stick or something or whatever, use spacing with your fingers. It doesn't have to be exact, but there should not be a noticeable different distance between each tree that looks the same in any part of the whole entire forest.
Mm-hmm.
So
that could be really tricky to do.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to think, like there's these puzzles where like you can only arrange things certain ways for it to actually work. Stuff like, have you ever played that game where it's like in this version of the game is what I'm familiar with, so it might sound a little weird, but it's these cars and it's called Traffic Jam. And you put these cards on a grid and you move them and they can only move so many directions. And you have this one car is your car and you're trying to get it from one end of the lot to the other. Ooh. And so you move the other cars in the parking lot or the traffic jam to get the other car to travel through it. And it's an intricate puzzle where you're like, I have to move this one here. Then this one moves 3 spaces down and this one can move 2 spaces now to the side. And it's kind of like that. It's like a little intricate puzzle.
Game. That sounds really fun.
It's a really rudimentary game. You can probably find like a flash
nice.
Of it online somewhere. But anyway, yeah, go play Traffic Jam or go get in a Traffic Jam. It's hilariously fun. But no, all your spacing should be different, no matter what. And this is where it gets fun though, is because I've had forest plantings where I've had trees that are like right up on each other, like not even a millimeter away from. They're basically touching, right?
And sometimes they fuse and become their own little clump, especially with maples. Oh
yeah, especially with Japanese and tridents. They'll fuse together and make a root base together. But then you need a tree that is like the farthest away, and don't make it so far away it's silly looking, but like farther than you feel like is like right at the end of the comfort zone for that tree. That's kind of how you kind of can look at the spacings. Like, okay, what's the scale of my forest? How far away? It's like, I have a little tree here. I'm not going to put it 3 feet away. That's going to feel absolutely ridiculous. But like 6 inches away is a decent distance. So it's number 1 is spacing. Number 2 is going to be heights of each tree. The height of each tree should be different. I'm sure you've seen this as well, but there's a lot of play in this is one of the play rules. Like you don't have to have every tree a different height. It doesn't have to look like AT&T bars of service of trees, you know, like but there has to be different heights and different trees. And then another thing is that there needs to be different thicknesses in the trunks. And so where this becomes complicated is different space, different heights, different trunk girths. Where it gets complicated is whenever you start adding more and more and more trees.
Yeah. And generally the height relates to trunk girth. So usually in a forest planting, you have like 3 main trees, right? You have your one main tree and then kind of 2 other trees that are like second and third. And then you have however many others kind of in the mix. And generally, your tallest tree is also going to be like your thickest, most developed tree. And like your secondary tree will be the second thickest, third tree will be third thickest, you know, and then like all your other trees based on their heights and like that. So if you have tall trees usually they're a little bit thicker than your short trees, which are representing younger trees, so they're going to be thinner. So it does start to get really complex at that point, and it really gets wacky when, you know, one of your background trees becomes thicker than your main tree, and you're like, now what? And anyway, but those are problems for down the line.
Yeah, that's for particular types of forest planting, because there's so many different more types of forest plantings. Like you have so many different bonsai forms and shapes, and we've talked about all those different things for some of the previous episodes, where it's like, what is an informal upright? What is a clump style? What is a a literati, and yada yada. And now we're talking about something that becomes even more complex within itself, depending on what you're trying to achieve with type of forest. So there's different types of forest. So it's the same way that I describe to people, and I want to get like a count of the number of times I say bald cypress. I mean, like, and when we like have a show recap, like, I don't know if it's possible, but just like how many times I say those words. But whenever I'm trying to describe flat top bald cypresses to people, that design, the best way I could describe it is that it's either a close up bonsai or it's a far away bonsai. Flat top bald cypresses tend to be a far away bonsai perspective. So meaning that the tree is taller and skinnier and has less detailed features about it.
Right.
So that's kind of what you have to look at with your forest. Your forest can have big fat trees in it, but all those trees have to have very similar character. In order for it to feel believable. So and then we're talk about numbers of trees. So what do you think is an appropriate number? What is the least amount of trees you can have in a forest, do you think?
I would say 5 probably, because
5,
three still kind of reads as a clump to me.
Okay.
You know, so 5 could be clumpy, but that kind of starts to get you into a forest. And then upwards of that until however many, 5 to 1 zillion.
5 to 1 zillion. I mean, like infinite trees.
Infinite trees. Yeah. 5
have like
to infinite.
You have like a black hole on one side. You just can keep going.
Keep adding.
But no, the number, my number is like actually 3, and it teeters on like 3 plus another, like some kind of accenting kind of type tree.
Yeah.
And when I say accenting tree, there's a couple of different circumstances for that. 3 strong trees, and then 1 tree that kind of sets the stage for something else, like maybe even a different species. Sometimes in some cases that works out. It's very difficult to pull off like multiple species plantings. If you're going to build a forest planting, my recommendation for beginners is don't go straight for like mixed species plantings. Those are
that's really
way
tricky.
more complicated. But yeah, 5 is actually a good start, and 5 is kind of like sets this golden standard for forest plantings, because usually this is kind of how I see it. Where does a group planting, which would be 2 or 3, convert over to a forest? And it's usually around 5.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
And then when you're planting your forest planting, when you're arranging your trees, they shouldn't be linear. They shouldn't be boxed in. They shouldn't be in a circle or anything weird. Usually I approach it where there's miniature forests that link together into a bigger forest.
Yeah, so you like almost have multiple clumps of like 3 or 5 or 7 within
the whole group.
Within the whole forest, yeah.
Are odd numbers or even numbers a no-no, in your opinion, Carmen?
It's hard to do even numbers well.
Yeah,
and I think in Japan that 4 is an unlucky number, which is why they tend to avoid it. But I've seen 4 done well, but it's not common. I think it's generally easier to do odd numbers, but if you're upwards of like 10 trees, I don't know that you're going to be able to tell that there's like 15 trees or 16 trees, you know, like at that point, I don't know how much it matters. but with fewer trees, I generally aim for odd numbers just because it's a little bit easier to get that asymmetry.
Yeah, because the less
It's
trees in
already
your
symmetrical.
forest, the more obvious the
Right.
number and the spacing and the heights.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen forests go up to like near 100, which
Oh, wow.
is just
Yeah.
insane. But that's a different type of forest planting. It's like a sapling forest kind of
Mhm.
feel, like really young, fast vegetation style.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of the bigger, nicer, I think the happy medium is anywhere between 5 is a great like number for trees that if you're trying to do something simple and you're trying to really show off the characteristics of these really particular things in a forest. Like
Mm-hmm.
let's say you are doing the tridents and you're doing trident maples and they have that lumpy thing, but then about 3/4 up the way of the tree, they do like this crook, like suddenly in the
Mhm.
top, this really pronounced, like beautiful old looking crook to it. And then the rest of the other trees kind of follow suit, but don't mimic it exactly.
Yeah.
So those smaller groups are good for that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're going to density, you usually get up into like closer to like 15 to 17 or so. 20s and 30s get really, really challenging. But those
Yeah.
high density forests are really impressive, but they're very difficult to pull off when you get up into those levels because
Mm-hmm.
each individual tree becomes less important as the group becomes
Mhm.
more important. And this is something that I heard in the past. I don't know if this is true or not, but this was a Japanese guideline for forest plantings is that you should never use even numbers. You should always use odd, and you should only use numbers that are indivisible.
Oh, so prime.
So prime numbers. Yep.
Hmm.
That's something I heard. I don't know if that's necessarily like by the book, but I think it's a good rule.
Yeah.
Because forest plantings, like it's the whole philosophy is like forest planting is only as strong as the whole because the whole entire group is only divisible by itself. You know, like that
Yeah.
whole, that's really philosophical and really cool. But I think because the numbers are so much more important in
Mhm.
Japanese bonsai too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I like that.
I do
but-
too.
It's still challenging. And I mean, we're just scratching the surface here of forest plantings too, because there could be forest planting on a flat plane, which is usually the
Mhm.
most typical one you see, or you see hills. I've seen some good, like really nice hill planting, forest plantings,
Mm-hmm.
rock, like miscellaneous rock type forest plantings. There's one at the Pacific Bonsai Museum that's like, I don't know if you remember this one, but it's like these junipers on these like rock
Mm-hmm.
pieces that are just it feels like they're randomly arranged,
Yeah.
but the forest just like feels like it's pouring over the rocks. And
Yeah.
and
That's nice.
it's just a beautiful forest, and they all kind of have like this windswept look to them. So it's very challenging. And then like forests themselves have, I just said windswept, they have their own distinct styles within. Like you could have a windswept forest, or you could have a formal upright, like every tree is very straight forest style.
Mhm.
You can have a open canopy kind of wild kind of feeling deciduous forest that's very
Mhm.
different from your pine tree forest. And everything in between, like informals and zigzag and all kinds of like, can't really make like a literati forest, but I've seen borderline Beijing style kind of literati-esque feeling forest though too.
Yeah. I feel almost like if you have like a rock planting and you're doing multiple trees like hanging off a cliff, kind of that style, maybe you could
Do
I don't know.
cascading a little bit. I've seen some
Yeah.
semi-cascade feeling, but you're not gonna like pull off like a cascade forest. Could you imagine like
That'd be so funny. I want to try it.
every tree is like below the soil line? That would be insane.
How would you even? I don't know. I'm gonna make it work.
Yeah, that would be really weird. Like
That's my new
the
project. I got to start some juniper cuttings.
planting's just like flat on the table, and there's a few rocks to kind of give you that, because like
Mhm.
that's not undoable. You would have to be
How do you
really
even-
creative about it though.
Yeah, I'm gonna try it.
Yeah.
Try it.
It sounds fun. I know.
So-
Anyway,
I was just gonna say that Michael Hagedorn has a really interesting post. If you go to his blog, it's crataegus.com/blog. And then if you search for I think it's the coin toss exercise, And this is a way to get randomness within your forest planting. So essentially what he's talking about is taking like a handful of coins or buttons or whatever and tossing them out onto the table or a floor or whatever. And the random arrangement, however those land, you can take a photo of it or whatever. And that can be a guideline for where you put your trunks, right? So it's each button or coin is a trunk. And so you can delete from that if you don't like it, but that gives you more random spacing. So that's an interesting way to create a forest. The other way I've seen that's kind of interesting is if you just take a handful of like maple seeds and throw them in a pot and let them all germinate, and then keep what you like and pull what you don't like and kind of develop it all in place, just, you know, as they've landed there.
Yeah, like a true randomization, because
when you try to make things random, I don't know if you've tried to make things random, but it's really hard to make something random because our brains don't work that way. We work in
formulated numbers, and I mean we're taught in school to think in equations and make things add up properly. We don't think in fractions and randomness like that.
We need to be organized. We don't think in coin toss.
Yeah, like literal randomness. That's a really good exercise. I'll have to do that next time, trying to come up with something creative for forest planning like that. Because I mean,
just take a handful of cuttings and just throw them into
like try to like dart throw them into a pot and see if they stick.
Like stand across the room and just toss them right into the pot.
If you could throw like cuttings into a pot like darts and get them to stick, and then you're able to make a forest planting out of that,
amazing.
I would love to see that. That would be amazing. Any of the patrons out there that do that, please share.
Get a dartboard and then attach your cuttings to the darts and throw them, and then the dartboard becomes the pot on a wall, and then they all grow phototropically towards the light. And now we're getting is this pop bonsai now, or
no we do bonsai professionally, can you tell? But no, sometimes we just kind of think outside the box, and if that's what it takes,
that'd be fun.
That would be really interesting. Pop, we still need to go into pop bonsai. You told me you need a little bit more time on that one, but we'll see. It's
a complicated subject.
It does sound like it is.
Yeah, and see, like that, I don't know, is that kitschy? Is it good kitschy or is it bad kitschy? I'd say it's good kitschy. I'm going to look for a dartboard at Goodwill.
I didn't say not to do it. It's not.
Oh, I know.
You were like, you're like, tell me not to, and I will.
Yeah. Come on, tell me not to do it. Somebody tell me to stop.
Tell her that it's not good. You're not doing the right thing. No, it's
that makes me do things.
Just think about it. I don't know about the dartboard thing. We're still talking about forest plantings, by the way. But
sorry, back to forests.
But no, that's a really awesome way to do it. Leave it up to Michael to always come up with some really cool stuff. To really think about things, put things on their head in some instances. So. But yeah, the spacing, the distances, the trunk height, like calibers and the heights, everything should be different. The numbers are really important. The species are really important. The characters of all the trees. And so how do you go about getting the materials together for a forest planting? I get this question every once in a while when I'm at the nursery. A bonsai nursery is a great place to go get materials for a forest planting, because if your guy that's doing bonsai work and he has lots of trees, generally there will be a lot of cuttings or seedlings or just more developed trees that might be like backlot or back burner style trees, where they're just they know that those trees could be good forest planting trees, so they're not like chopped down really hard. They're left kind of skinny and tall on purpose. But another way to do it is just take a bunch of cuttings. I mean, we always come back to this I feel like I'm just saying this on repeat. Like maybe Matt can just edit it in. Like every time like Carmen's like, how's it going? I'm like, take a bunch of cuttings off your trees. And you're like, oh, that's great. So what's today's topic? Take a bunch of cuttings. So like, it's just like, I can't say that enough, because if you take cuttings and then grow them out, and let's say on mistake, you let some grow out real straight and tall, and you got like 20 of them, boom, there's your forest planting material.
Yeah.
Play around with that. It might not be perfect, might not be ideal because you still need a number 1 and a number 2 tree, which is kind of the first branch and second branch of your forest planting. So those might be the more difficult elements to locate. If you find one tree that you really like and you want to build around that tree, that's tough to do, but it's not impossible, especially if you have a lot of stock around you that's similar. So I think
a lot of those trees that can't stand alone as bonsai make really good trees for forest because, you know, they're kind of one-sided, or they're, you know, they don't have branches as low as you want them or whatever. But yeah, instead of just throwing them away, put them all together so that they can fix each other's flaws.
Kind of like I've literally seen somebody else that was in bonsai say, what are you going to do with a bunch of ugly trees? Stick them all together. And it's like, yeah, you fix the issue, but at the same time it still has to work. But
oh yeah, it still has to work.
Yeah, and what I was going to say a second ago was like one of the mistakes that a beginner can make by making a forest planting is going in and choosing a bunch of trees that they just think will work, like a bunch of trees that are the same size, same height, and just stick them in the pot together and then go, this is it. This is how it's going to work. You know, like I'm just going to trim these and then it's going to be my little forest. It's going to look good. And then it's going to look not right for a very long time until the basic guidelines of different distances, heights, trunk diameters are more understood in that forest planting. And those things can happen. You can, like we were suggesting earlier, stick seedlings in there and like let them grow at random and cut out the ones you don't like and grow the ones you do like. Just keep in mind you have to grow a handful of them out to get different sizes, wire some of them out to get different movements.
Right.
So it's
you still have to work each tree, you know, individually to create this thing. You can't just, you know, grow a bunch of seedlings and hedge prune it. But yeah, it can give you the randomness, at least the different distances between trunks.
Yeah. And earlier I had a little bit of a technical issue and it kind of ran me and Carmen's time together in weird time. So we're going to actually wrap this up with the bonsai word of the day for this episode.
Do you want to do the critique?
Yeah, we could do the critique instead of doing the bonsai of the work. I'll just drop it. Okay.
Well, we already had our word of the week is lumpy, so
is it lumpy? We're going to do the forest planting critique. This is what I got from. I got an email about this forest planting to give some context. So 1 second. Let me pull up the email. Go down here. There we go. From Jason. I'm assuming that's one of our bonsai best buds because
that's Backyard Bonsai Australia.
Yep. Sorry if I don't know y'all's official names. I see handle names all day long. Points of note he put on here for me. This is a raft. It's at the stage where it looks like a forest until closely inspected. It's originally a style set up circa 1975. So it was styled in 1975, put together apparently. Tray size is roughly about 40 to 50 centimeters. And in American, that's 16 to 20 inches. Total height, about the same. Photo shows 2,393 shows. Oh, it shows like that's the specified number of the actual picture. It shows the original tree leading to the raft. Last major touch up was in 2000 by a visiting bonsai artist professional that came to the Australian Bonsai Club based in Sydney, Australia. The owner is Rick Rogers, founder of Uruin, which is the bonsai best bud that I named earlier. That was new to this list today on this episode. An open bonsai garden. We are aiming to open central coast of
New South Wales,
Australia. And then he says, "Oh, the original artist that set it up with Rick was the initial design was by John Naka." That's enough info. That's what he has at the end here. He's like, "Okay, that's enough." He's like, "I'm done." But yeah, so we have an old juniper forest that is actually a a connected raft forest. This is going to be posted on our Instagram, Little Things for Bonsai People. It's going to say episode 40 is linked up to it, so you guys can go over there and look at it there. Right off the bat, I'm seeing the number one is not dead center, but the way that it moves straight the dead center of the pot is a little too dead center. And I see trunks that waver in or out toward each other, but away from each other. We have we have, if I'm seeing this right, it looks like there's two trees moving towards the front that like are almost identical in the way that they move. Like they like both kind of move forward and then up slightly and then lean forward. So it's got a lot going on. See, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
I feel like the number 2 trunk is kind of in the middle of the pot and going backwards.
It's hard to tell. Hold on, let me go to the.
It is a little bit hard to tell.
Images.
But
it is.
I feel like those 2 main trunks are kind of battling, going back and forth, and maybe it's just the angle that I'm looking at the tree from. But
it's so also the picture's like a 2D perspective too. So what we're seeing in flat plane. Yeah.
But overall, I do like the Nabari on this. I think it's interesting how it's all, I mean, you said it's a raft. I think it's really interesting how everything's kind of intertwined. The whole silhouette looks like it has good balance. There's a very clear flow to the tree. So, I mean, overall, I think it's a nice little forest.
Now, I'm assuming that they will clean up the pads on this tree.
Yeah, it could use a little bit of wiring and cleaning up.
Yeah. This looks like Kishu.
Is it Kishu?
It looks like Kishu.
Well, Chinese juniper can look kind of like Kishu.
Is it Chinese
but
juniper?
I don't. Yeah, I think it says Juniper chinensis.
Oh, okay, that makes more. More sense. Okay.
Yeah, but it could use a little wire and a little cleanup there.
I see a lot of floppiness in the pads. There could be a lot more support there. I mean, junipers live with wire on them, so wouldn't hurt. It would be actually the wiring job would hurt. This thing would be one hell of a project.
I want to do it. I'm like in the juniper mood right now. It's juniper season.
Fly Carmen over to Australia. She'll take care of it for you.
Yes, please.
Just remember to pay her fee.
And for my flight. It's a very expensive trip.
Yeah. If this is for a public garden space, they're saying this is a really nice start to setting the whole stage. I mean, this tree is, like you said, like forest plantings, they usually draw a lot of attention in collections. I have a bald cypress forest at the nursery, and people always they're looking around, they go, no way, a bunch of trees on one in one thing together. I'm like, yeah, it's totally possible. So make sure that this thing is real pretty. It's real wired out. All the pads are laid out. Because I think from my perspective, what I'm seeing, there's some shots where you can see up into the branch structure, which is lovely. But from the 2D flat, that's going to be, that's actually one way to look at bonsai. If you're trying to design a tree and you're trying to see there's little things that are you're like, something's missing in this tree, and you take a picture of it on your phone and it looks flat and you're like, what happened? This tree looks so good to me in person, because you're literally oscillating, moving around this thing. So when you take a flat picture of it, that can show you flaws. And so one of the things I can see is I can't see the breakup on the left side of the forest. There's all those branches kind of come together awkwardly. I don't know which angles they're dropping at, if they're complementing each other or if they're pushing away. Carmen said that there was that one tree that kind of looks like it's battling with the first tree. It goes back towards it and kind of runs into it slightly. And it further emphasizes that branch, that when you go up the tree, there's a branch that comes up and goes to the side as well, also going against that line. Yeah. So you can use techniques like bracing, like bamboo stilts, to kind of put the trees a distance between them and literally force them apart from each other. And it might take a long time for them to set because, I mean, these are junipers. It'll probably take years for that angle to actually stay, right? It's not like a deciduous tree where you can just chop it and regrow.
It'll be faster than a spruce, that's for sure. Everything's faster than a spruce.
Yeah. And that's what I mean by like these trees live with wire on them. So
Yeah.
having a
Junipers
brace
are
in there.
constantly wired and
Yeah.
wired. Yeah,
It
I would
needs-
also maybe shorten stuff on the left side a little bit because if your flow's down to your right, the left side is a little bit
It is heavy. Mhm.
too long. And then I like that there's John Naka in the history. That's really interesting too. And
It brings the provenance up.
Yeah, for sure.
It kind of lets me look at me and you, Carmen, had a conversation about this when we were at the ABS show in Denver about if it's an old tree and there's flaws and there's things that obviously need to be fixed, should we go about really going forward and pushing and fixing it if we're trying to represent an old style?
I see, and that's so hard because like if it was a tree done by a certain person, then you almost want to preserve, you know, what they did. But at the same time, if you can improve it, it's I don't know. It's a tricky question. It's a tricky question. Like this one, I would not go as far as, graft it. Like I wouldn't switch the foliage on this one, because a lot of times you'll do that with the Chinensis. You'll switch it to Kishu or, something like that, a Toagawa. But like this tree is mature, it's old, it's got a style. This is something I would probably work within the bounds that are already there and make improvements that would make it the best it can be as it is, rather than trying to make it like the winner of a national exhibition or something,
So my takeaway from this forest planting, keep calling it a tree. Whenever I look at forest plantings or rafts,
well, it's a raft, so technically it is one tree.
It's one tree. I get that. Carmen, don't get me started. So I'm looking at it as like one composition. So I'm gonna go ahead and just say what I need to say about what I would change personally. So there's a couple of things like I just noticed that there's not just like there's that one tree that's going against the number one. There's actually 1, 2, 3 trees around the base of that.
Yeah, there are.
And I didn't notice that till now. What I would like to be able to notice is I would like to be able to notice that more. If that's something that you're showing, is that the way that those trunks waver in and out, and then you have these 3 trees that are like those. I actually really like what those are doing right there. Showcase that more. Get some of those droopy branches up and kind of raised so you can see those trunk lines more pronounced. Fix like Carmen had mentioned, fix the weight of the left side because the flow is definitely going to the right from left to right. So I would probably bring some of those trunks upwards, or maybe try to key them in, like try to prune them in or wire them in so it feels a little shorter on that side. But yeah, and then my thing with the top, where you see the top of the tree and it kind of goes back and then you get this big mess and slurry of branches. If there was a little bit more cohesion there, like if those were laid into pads and I can actually see lines in towards the top of the canopy, that would be really lovely.
Yeah.
The one thing that I really, really like that kind of stands out as a cool kind of thing, that this is kind of like something in art when you see like when I did like art history, they talked about when painters would make compositions, they would do something and then they would repeat it over and over because it's something they liked. It kind of helped to tie the piece together. So they would do like a brush stroke or a movement. And then you would see that recur over and over and over in the painting, just subtly. There's this part of the canopy. I'm going to post the picture on Instagram. It's the picture of the fall color kind of looking against the black backdrop. So you have the canopy and you have this big thick piece that comes out. And then below that, there's a section where it breaks up and it looks like there's pieces behind it. That's really awesome looking. I like the way that looks. So if you can find a way to make more of the forest planting look like that, I think that would be great. That's the kind of breakup I'm talking about. And then that kind of brings me to the crown. The crown, I feel like, could be flattened. I know we're going for this like pyramidal shape for the overall design of the forest, but I feel like the crown on the main tree is still too high. I feel like it needs to come down. It needs to kind of go blend in.
Domed a
rest-
little bit more. Yeah.
Exactly. Dome it out and give it a nice cutaway style
Mhm.
crown. But I'm not talking about super rigid, like super Japanese, because this is speaking a little Beijing to me in a way. So keep it loose, keep it kind of open. Like I would like to see more air spaces in here. That's basically what I'm saying too. So
Yeah, the Chinensis doesn't really get as thick as the Shimpaku junipers do. So I think that trying to really make it look cloud-like, really fluffy cloud-like pads would be nice for this. I would also recommend maybe changing the pot to something a little bit maybe darker.
spicy.
Something maybe just a little bit more interesting. Trying to think what I would recommend.
A rock slab would be really cool.
A slab would be really nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be really nice. Yeah, I don't love the lip for this pot, but or for,
Maybe
with this composition. So maybe even just like an oval that doesn't have a lip, something a little bit darker, a little more grayish, less orange, I think. So I don't know. I mean, there's options.
and yeah, that's kind of the weird thing was like we didn't get to talk about like pot selection or planting styles of forest, and I feel like we should carry that over into the next episode
Yeah,
for
that'll
sure.
be for next time.
Because there's a lot of considerations.
Oh
Because
boy.
with this juniper, it's like, oh, it's unglazed and it's deeper because it needs drainage. It's a forest planting. It's a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
So the aesthetics need to be approached a lot differently. So
Yeah.
but yeah, let's do the bonsai word of the week for a couple of moments, and then
All right.
we'll wrap it up. I chose one that it kind of ties into what we were saying earlier. It's going to be Kinji.
Kinji. What does that mean?
Kengai. Kinji.
Kinji. What does it
It's
mean?
a cascade style.
Oh,
We can talk about Kinji in a later episode. I don't get to see a lot of cascade trees because I'm in Louisiana, but
we'll talk about my Cascade Forest.
there you go. That's why I was tying it in. I thought it was kind of funny. We'll get Carmen to make a cascade forest, and then we'll really deep dive into the Kinji forest planting style. The apex of the tree in cascade style should be either right on level with the rim for semi cascades. For a true full cascade, though, the more than half of the tree, even if like almost 100% of the tree, should be below the rim of the pot, like the foliage mass. So cascades are weird. They can go extreme. Like I've seen cascades where they'll have a cascade pot that's like super deep, like I'm talking like almost 2 feet tall, and the trunk is in. It's like on a stand that's even taller, and the actual foliage of the tree doesn't start until like past the stand.
Oh wow, yeah.
There's some tropicals down here. I've seen people do that with some ficuses and other types of trees. Bougainvillea, very common, where there's just the cascade is outrageously long. But it's more about the flow, and maybe even has some exposed root elements. I'm stumbling on the Japanese terminology for the exposed root style right now, even though that's like my thing apparently, but can't remember it off the top of my head. But anyway, so yeah, so you get a lot of exposed roots, or you get really grounded fat trees that have a semi-cascade. I mean, there's a whole world of semi to full cascade styles out there.
Yeah.
And any species is suitable for it. Don't let people tell you they're not, because if somebody hasn't made a cascade, I'm sorry, neighbor outside was doing something weird. If the cascade style hasn't been done with the species you're imagining it in, then maybe you should do it. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, who says that something weird can't happen and a bald cypress can't cascade down the side of a mountain? You don't know.
That would be very strange.
That would be very odd. But why not? They cascade off of riverside and down into the river, into the ponds and lakes and swamps. So that is not cascade. So
yeah, that's a cascade.
Don't ever let anybody tell you that it's not possible with some species. But we'll have to do like a whole thing on those too. But anyway. Yep. So we're gonna bring this on to the next episode to talk more about container selection and a little bit more of a deep dive, and hopefully I can get Mike to come in on the next one, and we can really get into forest planting more. So, but yeah, thanks for tuning in with us today. And if you guys listen this far into the show, remember to subscribe on your favorite listening platform. If you can't become a patron, or you can't like share or anything, or listen to all our episodes, backlog all of them. If you don't, I mean, that's a really good idea if you want to get some really sweet earlier content, but just make sure you subscribe. I mean, just pressing the subscribe button goes a really far way for us. Check out underhillbonsai.com. Check out Purple Pot Society at purplepotsociety.org. Check out the Cartagus.com for Michael Hagedorn. Check out kitsunebonsai.com for Mike Lane. So yeah, do all those things. Be sweet to us. Be nice to us. We work real hard on this show. We really appreciate it. But yeah, thank you guys so much for y'all's listener support. Thanks for hanging out today. And I'll talk to you on the next one, Carmen.
Sounds good. I'll catch you on the flip flop.
On the flip flop. I'm about to slip on my flip flops and go back outside and start watering my trees and trimming my trees. All right, Carmen. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.